You are now listening to the Building Her Dream podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with introverted women entrepreneurs who are building their dream lives and businesses on their own terms. Hosted by business operations strategist, author, and the founder of Building Her Dream, Shayla Burton. To learn more about this podcast and our magazine, visit www.buildingherdream.com. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm your host, Shayla Burton, and this is the Building Her Dream podcast. I'm really excited to chat with today's guest. She is a memoir writing expert. She can help you write your life story and put it out to the world. She believes in helping others heal from their past trauma through writing their life story. When she's not helping others write, she is a life coach and a wellness coach. She's also the founder of $1 Million Memoirs. All the way from New York, we have Kimberly Henry. Hi, Kimberly. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. Now, on this podcast, we believe in living the dream life. So, Kimberly, I have to ask you, if you could wake up tomorrow and have the perfect dream life, what would that look like? Where would you be? What would you be doing? What's your dream?
Well, I've had a dream of owning a home near the Alps. So having the Alps as my backyard with
Okay.
a porch, so then I can have my cup of tea being with the Alps.
Yeah.
And like being a speaker all around the world, whether it's virtual, in person, combination. Just keep my story, helping people to get that their story matters and helping people to heal through that way. And my best friend lives in Germany, so I'd be able to spend time with her and travel with her. And giving as much as I can, just serving people, whether it's through charities, my time, that would be my ideal.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Traveling is definitely a part of my dream. So that's what I'm working on over here. Yeah.
I love it. It always makes me so happy, especially to see a different part of the world. I didn't get to Europe until I was 39 and celebrated my 40th birthday in Germany with my best friend and her family.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is a lovely way to celebrate your 40th for sure.
It was.
Yes. Well, it's never too late to get your traveling in for sure.
Exactly.
Yes, especially when you're older, because you have a little bit more money and you're a little wiser. So I think that's the perfect time to travel.
Yeah, the life experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey? So like when and how did it begin?
I worked for the state. I was in corporate for 22 years. Single mom. So it served me because my daughter is now in her 20s. She was living in Europe for 4 years and she only just came back to the States. So it really did serve me. It got me to help her to get to where she wanted to be. And I didn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs while I was raising her. And then we went into lockdown and I started really diving deep within myself, doing that inner work that I didn't even know I needed to do. And I perceived it as wicked scary.
Yes.
And found how much of myself that I got to heal. And part of that was starting to give myself permission to write. Because I always knew that I wanted to write my story. I had obstacles though, like, is it worthy enough? Is it significant? I'm not a celebrity. Like, I haven't done a whole lot. There's a lot of single moms. There's a lot of moms who have dealt with domestic violence, a lot of children of alcoholics. And what it really came down to is I know that by sharing my story, I can teach lessons to people, and that's the key. So in 2021 of November, I left the corporate job and created $1 Million Memoirs, because I got that since I wrote my story, I can help other people to write their story. And I can help people to get that it's not about the writing, because I know a lot of people like myself, I'm a writer. And so like, I know people who are painters. Well, I have a belief that I'm not a painter and I can't possibly do painting. So I hear that all the time. Well, I'm not a writer, so I can't write. All of us have the ability to do it, you know? And so that started my process of being an entrepreneur and taking that leap of going from employee to working for myself and really getting why that was so important to me. So it's been a journey.
Yeah. It sounds like it. It sounds like it. So do you have a coaching program, or do you have a course? Like, how does your offer work?
Yeah, there's a coaching program, and there's also the offer that I can write it for you. So either I can write it for you, or I can help you with you writing it and help you with those things that come up, especially the emotional stuff. Because I know for me, it was a scary idea to be with my emotions, because I was scared that I was going to be triggered by going into something that was already traumatic and walking back into the trauma. So I had to coach myself. And so he helped me not only to deal with that stuff, but to also for accountability reasons. So that's really the number one reason what I get to do with people when they go through the coaching program is holding people accountable. You said this is what you want to do. You said this is by when you're going to have it done. And so having that accountability gets it so that it gets done, or at least get started.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So how does writing help people heal?
It's the journey of, so I'll give you an example.
Okay.
When I finally gave myself permission to write about my experience with domestic violence with my daughter's father, I did not understand why in my 20s, because I was 23 when I left him. So I had a full-time job. I now was the only caretaker for my daughter, and she was involved in a lot of stuff being little. And I didn't get why my friends at work were like, how are you possibly still getting up every day, coming to work, taking care of her, and still doing all of those things when I didn't even drive? I was taking public transportation everywhere. So when I finally gave myself permission to write, I found that peace and resolve within myself, and that grace and that compassion that, oh my God, I get it why people said that to me, because I went through a lot. I just didn't get it at that time, because I was going through survival mode of just getting through what I had to get through with family court constantly, and the child protective services, and police were getting involved, and it was constant. And when I wrote it and allowed myself to be with it, I mean, like allowing myself to cry, was having such compassion for myself, like, and acknowledging how strong I am and how resilient I am. So if there's ever a moment where I doubt if I can get through something, I always have that to go back to. Like, of course, if I can handle that, after 16, 17 years, I can handle anything. And if I can bring a child into this world, I can handle anything.
Exactly.
So that's really how I feel that people can heal through writing, is because it's not about the writing. It's about what you experience from the writing. That can be compassion. It can be grace. It can be forgiveness. When I finally wrote about my family,
Mm-hmm.
I started with my mom, and me and my mom's journey together with her cancer diagnosis. And then I linked it to her and her mom. And then I also linked it to my grandmother and her mother. So my
Wow.
great grandmother. And what I discovered was the lineage of the decades of grief and
Yeah.
sorrow that they never dealt with, because my grandmother was a year old when her mother died.
Mm.
And by the time my grandmother was 16, her entire family died.
Oh, wow.
So not only was she an orphan when she was a toddler, but she was literally an orphan, I'm sure she felt like, by the time she was a teenager. So
Mm-hmm.
it made sense why my mother was always at arm's length away, because my grandmother didn't know how to be a mother to my mother.
Yeah.
And so it was passed on, all of that hurt and all of that confusion that I'm sure my mother felt of, why doesn't my mom love me? Because from the stories I've heard, my grandmother was very critical and very harsh with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
I got such compassion for my ancestors, because I never met my grandmother. She died
Mm-hmm.
way before I was even thought of. I'm sure my parents were very happy with having only one child.
Mm-hmm.
And, knowing that that's where I come from too,
Mm-hmm.
especially women, I feel like I'm even prouder of myself that I can do this work, because they
Yeah.
didn't know about doing this kind of work. They didn't
Mm.
see it possible back then in that generation, that era.
Right.
Does that answer your question? I feel like I just kind of went off on a tangent.
No, you did. You did. Absolutely. Now, my question is, how would you approach working with people who are reluctant to share their stories, or they don't feel ready to write about their past experiences? Because I'm trying to think about myself.
Mhm.
I've thought about writing a book, but in my mind, I don't want to talk about that old stuff. I just want to think about the present. My life is good now. How would you approach to work with someone who's a little scared to go back?
Well, I would ask questions like, what is your biggest fear? Where's
Mm,
the resistance coming from of not wanting to even be with the past? Because the past is a part of us, it's not us.
right.
That's my message of my message, that we are not our past. We are more than
Mm,
our past. And how can we possibly hold ourselves for our future self if we're not willing to even be a part of our past, knowing that
mm,
we're not our past? Does that make sense?
yeah.
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 And and
Okay.
and getting that when you are in a place where you're willing to be with your story, it's not about you. It's about serving
Mm,
other people, because like I said, it's about the lessons that you can teach people. And that's what we need in this world. We
that's
need more
true.
people to be inspired by other people's story. And when I finally got that, if at the time, if one woman picked up my story and read it and related to it and saw a possibility in her life that she didn't see before reading my story, then I have served my purpose. Because
Yeah.
that is what I want. I want people to be inspired that they can live differently. They can live a life that they didn't think that they deserve or that they're worthy of. We're all
Mm,
worthy. We're all deserving. And if it takes my story for someone else to see that, wow, if she can do it, I can do it, then that's all I want.
right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I'll have to think about when I'm ready. When I'm ready to write that book. I think it's maybe I'm thinking of like the emotional part. Like I don't want to, start writing and then, be crying or something.
Oh my gosh, can I tell you, when I started writing about my mom, just
Hmm.
writing about, because I have a lot of good memories with going through my mom's cancer diagnosis with her, because it really gave us peace in our relationship. And I already had a good relationship with my mom. It just was
Hmm.
dysfunctional because with her being an alcoholic. And the
Yeah.
cancer journey, she stopped drinking before she got diagnosed. And so I finally saw a sober mom which I had wanted my entire life. And so when I finally sat down to really write about my experience with her and all of the journey that we went through, which it's really happy. I cried. I bawled my eyes out for 5 days. I got it done in 5 days, and I bawled my eyes out. And it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. Because that's the whole thing. Our perception is like, oh my God, it's way too scary. Oh my God, I can't handle that. I don't want to go back there. And that's our brains protecting us. That's what our brains are supposed to do. That's its job, is to protect us. And the reality is, the truth is, nothing's going to happen. And if anything, what's going to happen is your heart is going to be bigger because you've allowed yourself to be in that space with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I get what you're saying, because I felt like that too.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who have, a really great story to share, but they also may be feeling the same way. What tips or advice would you give to someone who they want to write their memoir, but maybe they feel intimidated or overwhelmed by the process?
Well, I say just get started, which is funny because when we were off camera and what we were talking about, that I said to you, I want to start a podcast, and I know I get started. So I'm preaching to the preacher right now. When it comes to starting your writing, just do it. And it's what you said to me, that I just get to do it. I just get started to start a podcast. And so there is no writer's block in my beliefs, because writer's block is perfection. And there is no perfection.
Right.
So it's just resistance. It's fear. And that's what it comes down to. What is your biggest fear? What are you most afraid of? And when it comes down to it, if it's whether I'm scared about what my family is going to think, I'm scared about what society is going to think, or my friends or whatever, then it's going back into the why you're doing it. Because for me, again, the why was about serving people and helping people to be inspired and a possibility for them to change their life. Because I know when I was in my 20s, even when I was in high school as a teenager, when my parents' alcoholism had been at the highest, they were in a rage by the time I got to be in high school. I went to celebrities and I looked up celebrities and who were dealing with, especially being children of alcoholics. And so I was looking for that inspiration, because for me as a kid, it's like, wow, Suzanne Summers can deal with that, and she can still be who she was at the time. Then of course I can do that. And Oprah, oh my gosh, like Oprah has an incredible story. So if Oprah can be at the place that she is and who she is, then that gave me inspiration as a high school student. Like, well, of course, that doesn't make me any different than who Oprah is. But I hope that answered your question.
Basically just do it. So you start the podcast, and then I'll get started on my book.
Yes, there we go. I'm in agreement with that.
Wow. So you mentioned that you went full-time in your business in November 2021. So how's that going? Because that's another scary thing for people to do, to quit your job and take the leap.
Well, I've given myself a lot of grace and compassion, because now that I really have done so much work within myself, taking that kind of leap actually put me back into being triggered with trauma, because it was like a response that my body had, that it was so frightening when I did it. I took some time off, which I'm grateful, because I did not realize just how much 22 years would really muck up my brain being with that work. And so it was interesting, because I really felt called to do it. I had no idea what it was going to look like. I had no idea what my next step was going to be. However, I felt a calling to do it. And as I did it, my aunt, my oldest of my father's side, his oldest sister, she was starting to transition. She was starting to really lose her memory. Like he could see it kind of coming to where she was starting to really get weak. And so I'm like, well, it makes sense. If I'm leaving this job, I know I get to rest. So I chose to take that time and be with her. And I got to spend the last 5 months with her.
Oh,
I went
wow.
every week and spent 3+ hours every week, plus calling her every other day. And what was amazing about that was I was just in my logical brain of, I just want my aunt to be happy. I just want her to feel at peace and I want her to feel loved. And if that means I'm just going to sit and listen to her for 3 hours, I can handle that. But what I didn't realize what was happening is she was allowing me a space where I was finally learning about that side of the family. Because my father was the youngest, and being an alcoholic, he didn't have memories. He didn't have those stories for me to understand that side of the family. So I had already kind of resigned 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Well, I'm never going to know this side of the family. There's no pictures, nobody around. And my aunt allowed me that space because she was starting to, what's the word I'm looking for? Not recall, but she was starting to go back into those stories for understanding so that she would have that resolve.
Okay.
So it became very clear that she was transitioning to the end of her life too, because she was going in way back. And she was really having difficulty with different stories and different scenarios that she experienced. And with her stories, is I found that like, wow, I do know these ancestors now.
Oh,
I
yeah.
do know this side of the family. And I went to ancestry.com, which by the way, I absolutely love doing that in my free time. I can go totally in the space of ancestry.com, say I'm going to spend a half hour, and 5 hours later, I'm still searching in there.
Oh, wow.
And I found the craziest things about that side of the family. Like, oh my gosh, it's no wonder why all of the men on that side of the family were alcoholics. Because like my grandfather's father, so when my great grandfather, I always get this confused, but anyways, he abandoned his sons and his wife. It's an actual article that the New York State Police went to the Massachusetts to get him, to bring him back on a warrant to New York State for abandoning his family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then my grandfather's brother, so it would be my great uncle, killed himself by drinking poison at the local police station.
Really?
Yeah.
So where that was in an article?
In an article.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the mother of my grandfather, my father had a perception of her that, and I don't want to swear on your show, so he had a perception of her that she was a bitch.
Okay.
I never understood that, other than he was the youngest, so of course he'd have that perception. But when I found all of this out, I'm like, well, I would too. If I had a husband that abandoned me and my kids, if her second husband was like 13 years her senior, and he ended up dying. He fell off of a ladder in the local theater. He was painting and he fell off the ladder and died.
Wow.
Well, I would be too. If my first husband abandoned me and the kids, my second husband died from falling off of a ladder, my kid killed himself by drinking poison.
Wow.
And then I found out just recently, my grandfather, so when my very traditional Catholics on this side of the family, my aunt had asked for Mother Mary statue from my grandmother and my grandfather when she was a teenager. His solution was to go to a neighbor's home, an elderly woman who had just been sent to the hospital. Him and his friend broke into this woman's home and stole not only the Mother Mary statue, stole coal, stole a watch, and stole cash. So now there's a newspaper article that he was charged with this. And the only reason why they didn't go to trial was because that woman died while she was in the hospital.
Mm.
So it just gave me
Wow.
such a picture of like, it's all chaotic.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, the stem of it, the root of it is trauma
Mm-hmm.
that nobody
Exactly.
knew how to deal with.
Right. Right.
So it really, and I got to share a little bit of that with her before she died. And even she was blown away. She's like, what? I didn't know my father was charged with that. I remember him giving me the statue. I didn't know he stole
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's an interesting journey because you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Never know what's gonna show up. And we like to feel as humans, we have that sense of control,
Mm-hmm.
and that fear comes up because it's like you said, the fear of the emotions. But
Mm-hmm.
really the bigger picture of it is the journey of what you discover as you're writing your story. Because you really find out more about yourself through learning about other parts of your life.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. As I was listening to you tell these stories, I was thinking like it would have been so cool if the past generations wrote their memoirs so that we could
No,
learn more about what they were up to.
I know, right? But I
Yeah.
would assume a lot of my family had worthiness conversations because for my grandfather to get that point of feeling that desperate to steal from a neighbor so that his
Hmm.
child could have a statue that she was asking for, that's a worthiness conversation.
Yeah.
So that is, even as I speak about that, that puts me in a place of feeling saddened
Mm.
for that because and honestly, the only way my aunt described her father was a town drunk because
Oh,
he
wow.
was known for being at the Hudson River drinking the cheapest bottle of wine.
Hmm.
And it was fascinating because his two oldest sons kind of followed in his footsteps. My oldest uncle was in prison by the time he was 17.
Hmm.
And then my other uncle was in and out of like these homes that were run by nuns. So they were for troubled kids, but the nuns would run them. And then there was
Mm.
my father. And my father kind of went the other direction because he didn't have anybody by the time he was an adolescent because he was 9 when his father died. And his
Mm.
brother was in prison, and his other brother was in and out of these homes for troubled kids. And so he quit school and he went into an apprenticeship for carpentry so he could take care of his mother.
Hmm.
So it's interesting even looking at it from that perspective.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which I
Yeah.
personally have always found fascinating. Like I know me and my sister were night and day. We grew up in the same house and we're
Hmm.
night and day. We're not alike at all.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And has your sister written a book at all?
No, no.
No.
That would be
Mm.
cool if she did. I don't know if she'll be in a place of doing that. She's really
Yeah.
gone through her own journey with domestic violence and getting that
Mhm.
she's worthy herself. I have to. It took me a long time to do a lot of this work. To
Right.
be honest, I still have worthiness conversations because it's like the root of it is I lived so long, so much of my life feeling like I wasn't worthy. So it's a constant process of doing that work within myself to get that whatever I dream of is possible. And
Right.
it's not about worthiness because I know I'm worthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Well, Kimberly, I would really like to hear some more stories, but we're running a little out of time. So I wanted to, give you an opportunity to share where our listeners can find out more information if they were interested in writing their story. How can they reach out to you?
Sure. So my website, and I'll give you the whole thing, because if you don't put in the whole thing, you're going to get another Kimberly Henry, because apparently there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah.
So it's https:// www.kimberlyhenrycoaching.com. And in there, I would also like to gift your listeners for a free ebook on the 5 ways to recover from your personal trauma. And that is for someone who, what you're speaking to, someone who is scared to get started, doesn't know where to get started. This is an ebook that will give you some simple ideas on ways that you can work and get started, like working on giving yourself permission, because they're very simplistic into how to get started, ways of getting started. And if they're interested in working with me, there's also a link on there to schedule a discovery call that we can meet with each other and see if it's a good match to work together.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, wonderful. We'll definitely check out your website, get that free ebook, and I might have to schedule a call with you, get started on my book as well. But thank you so much for joining me today, Kimberly.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, me too. And thank you to our audience for listening. This has been another episode of the Building Her Dream podcast. If you've enjoyed it, why don't you go ahead and subscribe, leave us a review, and stay up to date with what we're doing by visiting www.buildingherdream.com.